The Colorado Rockies weren't just a place for Elias Vance. They were a salve. Every crisp pine-scented breath was a prayer of thanks for the silence, a stark contrast to the decades of cacophony, the crack of rifle fire, the concussive thump of IEDs, the desperate shouts and languages he understood all too well. His cabin, a modest A-frame of weathered timber and stone, sat in the center of a 20-acre parcel that backed onto millions of acres of untamed national forest. It was his fortress of solitude. His border was marked not by fences, but by a simple, hand-painted sign nailed to a ponderosa pine: private. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Eyes will be kept on you. Most people heeded the warning. The Dalton brothers did not. Jesse and Cody Dalton were the worst kind of locals, entitled, mean, and stupid, a combination as volatile as nitroglycerin. Their family owned a sprawling ranch down in the valley, and they operated with the unshakable belief that the mountains, and everything in them, belonged to them by birthright. They rode their mud-caked, roaring ATVs wherever they pleased, leaving scars on the landscape and a gut-churning noise pollution in their wake. Their current obsession was the massive bull elk they'd nicknamed Phantom, a majestic, ghost-gray creature with a rack so wide it looked like it could cradle the moon. They'd caught glimpses of him on game cameras deep in the backcountry, always just out of range. And their latest footage, purchased from a pricey drone they'd flown illegally, showed Phantom's tracks leading right onto the property of the crazy hermit vet, as they called Elias. Ain't no law says we can't track an animal across a piece of land, Jesse, the older, broader brother, declared that morning, spitting a stream of tobacco onto the gravel of their driveway. Sides, that sign's just a suggestion. What's that old fart gonna do? Yell at us? Cody, leaner and more nervous, shifted his weight. I dunno, Jess. He's got that look. Like he's seen things. He's seen the bottom of a whiskey bottle is what he's seen. Jesse scoffed, loading his high-powered .300 Win Mag rifle into the side-by-side ATV. Let's go. Phantom's waiting. See conflict, the inciting incident. Elias was in his garden, tending to his tomatoes, when the silence shattered. The guttural roar of an unmuffled engine echoed through the valley, growing rapidly closer. He didn't look up. He simply stopped, his hands hovering over the rich soil, every sense dialing to a frequency he'd hoped was obsolete. He tracked the sound's vector. It wasn't on the Forest Service road. It was on his access road. It was on his land. He stood slowly, a tall man, lean and coiled like spring steel despite his 55 years. His movements were economical, devoid of wasted energy. He watched as the garish camo-painted ATV, spitting gravel and noise, crested the hill and skidded to a halt just inside his tree line. Two men in matching hunter orange vests jumped out, their laughter crude and alien in his sanctuary. Elias walked toward them, his boots making no sound on the soft earth. He stopped 20 yards away, his posture relaxed but his eyes missing nothing: the expensive rifles, the arrogant swagger, the complete lack of awareness. You're trespassing, he said, his voice a low, calm rumble, like distant thunder. Jesse Dalton turned, a smirk plastered on his face. We're hunting. Public resource. That bull elk is fair game. The elk is on my private property. So are you. You need to leave. Now. Elias's tone left no room for negotiation. Jesse's smirk didn't falter. He took a step forward, puffing out his chest. Or what? You gonna call the sheriff? Old man Henderson? By the time he gets his fat ass up this mountain, we'll be long gone with our trophy. Elias's gaze didn't waver. He looked from Jesse to Cody, who was fidgeting with his rifle strap. Last time. Leave. Jesse laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He deliberately turned his back on Elias, raising his binoculars to scan the tree line. Relax, Pops. We'll be out of your hair soon. Just go back to your whatever it is you do out here. The disrespect was a calculated provocation. But Elias Vance had been provoked by experts in hellholes across the globe. These boys were amateurs. He didn't react. He simply turned and walked back toward his cabin. He heard their derisive laughter follow him. Our rising action, the escalation. Elias didn't go inside to hide. He went to his tool shed. He emerged a moment later with a chainsaw. He walked to a fallen log 50 yards from the now parked ATV, pulled the cord, and the raspy snarl of the two-stroke engine joined the brothers' presence as a new violation of his peace. He wasn't cutting wood. He was conducting audio surveillance, the noise masking his true focus, listening. He heard their crude plans, their excitement as they found fresh scrapes on the trees, phantoms' markings. He heard them decide to push deeper onto his land, toward a high meadow the elk favored. An hour later, the chainsaw fell silent. The ATV was still there. The brothers were gone, having disappeared into the thick timber on foot. Elias's face was a granite mask. He entered his cabin. Inside was not the cluttered den of a hermit. It was neat, Spartan, and efficient. On a wall-mounted monitor, a live feed from 4 well-concealed trail cameras showed him the Dalton brothers' progress. They were a quarter-mile in, stalking up a game trail, completely oblivious to the lens tracking them from a nearby oak. Elias picked up a satellite phone. He dialed the non-emergency line for the county sheriff's office. He reported the trespass, the vehicle description, the license plate he'd memorized. The dispatcher sighed, familiar with the Daltons. "Deputy Henderson is on the other side of the county, Mr. Vance. It might be a few hours." "Understood," Elias said and hung up. The system was slow. He was not. The confrontation in the meadow was inevitable. Elias moved through the woods with a ghost silence, using terrain and cover they couldn't even conceive of. He emerged from the tree line as Jesse Dalton was raising his rifle, sighting on Phantom, who stood broadside 300 yards away, a king unaware of the poachers in his realm. "The sheriff has been called," Elias said, his voice cutting through the mountain air. Jesse jerked, the shot going wide and echoing like a cannon blast across the meadow. The elk vanished in a heartbeat. "You son of a bitch!" Jesse screamed, his face purpling with rage. He turned his rifle, not aiming at Elias, but gesturing wildly with it. "You cost me my shot! You were never going to get that shot," Elias said calmly, though every fiber of his being was now assessing the weapon's muzzle, Jesse's finger on the trigger guard, Cody's panicked stance. "You're poaching. On my land? Put the rifle down and walk out." "I ought to," Jesse started, taking a threatening step forward. It was the step that changed everything. It crossed a line from stupid arrogance into a tangible threat. In that moment, Elias Vance's Special Forces training, a layer of his soul as permanent as his own skeleton, took absolute and total command. Intensification, the trap is sprung. Elias didn't flinch. His eyes locked onto Jesse's. "Take one more step with that weapon in your hand," he said, his voice dropping to a deadly, conversational calm, "and you will learn a very painful, very permanent lesson about consequences." The change in him was terrifying. The old hermit was gone. In his place stood a predator, his stillness more threatening than any movement. Jesse Dalton, for the first time, felt a cold trickle of fear. He lowered the rifle. "This ain't over," he snarled, the bluster trying to cover his retreat. "We're leaving." But Elias knew men like the Daltons. Humiliation was a debt they always collected, with interest. He knew they wouldn't just leave. They'd be back. He was right. Under the cover of darkness, the roar of the ATV returned. This time, it wasn't for hunting. It was for revenge. Drunk and emboldened by cheap beer and wounded pride, Jesse and Cody planned to teach the old man a lesson. They'd smash his windows, maybe set his tool shed on fire. A warning. They parked in the same spot, their headlights cutting through the dark. They whooped and yelled, smashing a bottle on a rock. They had no idea they were standing in the middle of a tactical engagement area designed by a master. And momentum, the reversal of fortune. The first sign that things were horribly wrong was when the ATV's headlights and their flashlights suddenly died, plunging them into utter blackness. A thrown fuse, expertly targeted in the dark. "What the hell?" Cody whispered, his voice trembling. Then the voice came. It seemed to emanate from the trees all around them, distorted, low, and utterly devoid of mercy. It was Elias's voice, amplified through a small speaker. "You have been warned. You have been trespassed. You are now engaged." A rope, tensioned shin-high between two trees, caught Jesse as he stumbled forward. He went down hard, cursing. From the left, a powerful spotlight flared to life for a single second, blinding them, then vanished. They heard movement, but couldn't tell from where. "Stop playing games, you freak!" Jesse yelled, scrambling to his feet and fumbling for his rifle. A paintball, fired from a high-velocity marker from the darkness, struck him square in the center of his chest. It wasn't lethal, but the impact was brutal, knocking the wind from him and leaving a massive, painful bruise. He cried out in shock and pain. Cody panicked. He raised his own rifle and fired a wild shot into the trees where the light had been. The moment the shot rang out, the game changed entirely. A live round had been fired. The rules of engagement were now irrevocably altered. Elias moved. He didn't run, he flowed. Using the distraction of his own noisemakers, a thrown rock against a tree here, a crushed branch there, he closed the distance. To the brothers, he was a nightmare, a phantom more real than any elk. Cody felt a vice-like grip on his wrist, a precise pressure that forced him to drop his rifle. A foot swept his legs out from under him, and he was on the ground, a knee in his back, his own zip tie being used to secure his hands behind him before he could even process what had happened. Jesse, wheezing from the paintball impact, turned just in time to see his brother being subdued. He raised his weapon, but a shape materialized from the shadows beside him. An arm like an iron bar slammed across his throat in a crushing trachea hole, cutting off his air without rendering him unconscious. He dropped his rifle, clawing at the immovable arm. The voice was a whisper in his ear, cold and precise. "You fired a weapon on my property. That makes you a lethal threat. The next move is a break. Choose wisely." The fight drained out of Jesse Dalton, replaced by pure, primal terror. He went limp. He was zip-tied next to his sobbing brother. Elias stood over them. He collected their rifles, cleared the chambers, and secured them. He then walked to each of them, and with a clinical efficiency, performed a pat-down for other weapons. He found pistols and knives on both. He said nothing. The silence was more terrifying than any threat. Ending the poetic justice. 30 minutes later, the headlights of Deputy Henderson's SUV finally crawled up the road. The deputy, a large man who hated mountain calls, got out grumbling, expecting to find a couple of drunk kids and a pissed-off landowner. He stopped dead in his tracks. In the glare of his headlights, Jesse and Cody Dalton sat back to back, thoroughly zip-tied, their eyes wide with shock and fear. Their rifles, pistols, and knives were laid out neatly on a tarp in front of them, like evidence at a crime scene. Standing beside them, sipping a cup of tea as if it were a pleasant afternoon, was Elias Vance. "Evening, Deputy," Elias said calmly. "What in the name of... What happened here, Elias?" Henderson stammered, looking at the sophisticated zip ties, the precise arrangement, the terrified Daltons. "Trespassing, poaching, criminal mischief, and attempted assault with a deadly weapon," Elias recited, his voice flat. "I have their confession on audio, their poaching attempt on video, and the moment Mr. Cody Dalton discharged his firearm toward my person on multiple high-definition feeds. The evidence is compiled on this drive for you." He handed the stunned deputy a USB drive. The law arrived in force after that. The evidence was irrefutable. The DA, smelling a high-profile win, threw the book at them. The penalties for the Daltons were severe: heavy fines, lifetime hunting license revocations, and significant jail time for the combination of poaching, trespassing, and felony assault with a deadly weapon. Their family's reputation in the valley was shattered. They became a cautionary tale. A week after the sentencing, Deputy Henderson found himself back at Elias's cabin, returning the USB drive. He hesitated before leaving. "Elias, off the record. How? 2 of them armed and you..." He gestured at the peaceful meadow. Elias just looked out at the mountains, the place he'd fought so hard to find peace for. He finally looked back at the deputy, and in his eyes, Henderson saw a glimpse of the deep, cold water that lay beneath the calm surface. "They trespassed on my land," Elias said simply, as if that explained everything. "They just didn't know the kind of man they were trespassing on." He turned and walked back into his cabin, leaving the deputy standing in the silent, majestic wilderness, understanding for the first time that the most dangerous thing in these mountains wasn't a bear or a mountain lion. It was the quiet man who knew how to protect what was his. The silence, once again, was complete.